Well, you're referring to when I graduated from college and my father and I were having dinner and I asked him for career advice. And he shared with me that night what has been my lifelong career advice. He said, John, every day, value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love them. When we value people, we help them with their self worth. A lot
Yeah,
of people have low self worth. You know, in your world, in the athletic world, they talk about belief a lot, and belief
sure.
is very important. But can I tell you something? You can believe a lot, but if you're
So, John Maxwell, this is going to be fun. I got to tell you, I have admired you for years. So I am super grateful for your time. Let's dig in and have some fun. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks, Molly. Right back at you. I'm delighted. Leaders love to be with leaders. That's just the way it works. And you
Sure.
are such a good leader and have done so many wonderful things to help so many people and have a life of significance. So I have really looked forward to our time together today. So let's go help some people. What do you say?
Amen. I love it. And that word significance is something I want to dig into. But I really want to start here. And I was so fortunate to be a part of a recent book launch event that you did with High Road Leadership, your latest book. And wow, I mean, the number of books you've written. This one really I connected with. You know, the 12 things that we must do to be a high road leader. Can you get me a little bit inside of what is high road leadership, just for our listeners who haven't read it yet, if you will?
Yeah, let's do the subtitle for a moment, Molly. High Road Leadership with the subtitle, Bringing People Together in a World That Divides. Whenever I talk about the book and I use the subtitle, Bringing People Together in a World That Divides, the audience always is audible with it. It's like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we need. Because I think most of us know that we have a leadership vacuum. We have a little bit of a problem going on right now. And the reason that we have the problem is because we don't have enough high road leaders. And high road leaders, they make a positive difference in people's lives versus a low road leader that doesn't make those kind of deposits in people's lives. A high road leader, Molly, wants more for the people than from the people. And a low road leader, they want more from the people than for the people. Low road leaders are transactional. High road leaders are transformational. High road leaders, they're a plus in people's lives. Low road leaders, honestly, are a minus in people's lives. I just came back from Asia, and I was in Singapore and doing well, and then I met with the Prime Minister, and when I meet with them individually, now when the media's gone and it's just the two of us, I always ask them a question. The question I always ask them is very simple: are the people better off because you lead them, or are they worse off? Who's winning out of this leadership deal? Are you winning? I mean, are the people, you think the people are there to make your life better, or are you there to make their life better? And high road leaders, they're there to serve the people, add value to the people. They put the people first. And I really wrote the book, Molly, because I think we're going to have a tough year in our political campaign in the country, and I think it's very sad. And what I think it's sad about it is the fact that I think that neither party is providing us high road leadership. And I desperately am looking for somebody who will look in the camera and have authenticity to them and look at the people and say, I'm really for you. I think that, George Washington didn't even want political parties because he said if you have political parties, it won't be long before they put the party before the people. And I look around and say, that's happening right now on both sides. And it's very sad to me. And it's sad to me because it doesn't need to be that way.
Right.
And I wrote the book, High Road Leadership, to give people a picture of what a high road leader looks like, because people do what people see. And then the practices of high road leadership, I wrote every chapter to say, this is how you practice high road leadership, because that's how we get, in your world, hey, you know this world, you're the sports lady, you know that you get better by practicing.
100%.
And so it's kind of like, if you get the picture of what it looks like and then you practice and develop the skill set of it and make the right choices, you can be a high road leader. That's what we're going for.
So do we need to like write in a ticket for John Maxwell? I mean, what are you doing for the next 4 years, John? I mean, what do you think?
Honestly, it's a story that very few people know, but 8 years ago when Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were running, I had a very serious third party come in with about $800 million and said if I would be a third party candidate, they would get behind me. And they'd already vetted me and said they knew I could win in at least 9 states, and I had to then inform them that there are 50. And,
we got a gap, guys.
Yeah. If you say that you think I can win 26, I may be getting the game, but I'm not going to get in a game that I can be a spoiler but not a winner. And so I didn't do it. And I think I made the right decision, but I can tell you if I was, instead of 77, if I was 57, I would be running somewhere. And what's sad is there are thousands of men and women in our country that are very qualified to be the president of the United States, and they're really good leaders, but most of them won't run. And they won't run because of the whole, who wants to put their family through the media and all the other stuff that happens? I mean, it's not fun in a low road mindset world to try to be a high road leader. But we desperately need them. And I wrote the book because I'm an optimist, and I believe that it starts not in Washington, D.C. I believe it starts in our home, in our community. And so I said, get the book and learn to be a high road leader right where you are. And if enough of us do that, we'll develop some momentum and a movement that can can make a difference.
Why, John, do you think more people don't opt into a life of being a high road leader?
Well, I think one is that, honestly, they haven't seen one. I'm not sure a lot of people know what a high road leader looks like. That's why I wrote the book. In fact, I have 5 grandchildren, okay? 23 to 17. And I sat down with them the other day and I said, I'm going to mentor you in this book. Now, I've done this before with them. We're going to do it a chapter at a time because I want to make sure that you know what a high road leader looks like. I mean, you know me. I'm your grandfather, but we, you get to the younger generation, they really haven't seen much high road leadership at all. And so therefore, we got to draw that picture out for them. And so I think that once people understand the value and the difference they can make in other people's lives, they'll want to be a high road leader. In our John Maxwell enterprise, we have a statement, Molly, that says, everyone deserves to be led well. And I really believe that in my heart. And I travel internationally a lot. And I go to places in the world where people are not being led well. And it makes my heart break because they've not had the privilege of being in a leadership culture and environment that lifts them. Sometimes it suppresses them. And I guess I'm hitting a little bit of a panic button in the fact to say, I don't want this to happen in America. We're better. We're better than this. So hopefully the book will be a one that it's a great learning, mentoring book is what it really is on leadership.
Absolutely. One of the chapters, there's several chapters that stuck out to me. Value all people.
Yes.
And you talk, John, about how this was inspired by your dad and what a great start you had with your parents. And I feel really connected to that. I feel the same way. I love how you say, I hit the jackpot with my parents. John, I did too. And for that, I feel very blessed. Get me inside a little bit of how high road leaders think about valuing all people.
Well, you're referring to when I graduated from college and my father and I were having dinner and I asked him for career advice. And he shared with me that night what has been my lifelong career advice. He said, John, every day, value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love them. When we value people, we help them with their self-worth. A lot of people have low self-worth. In your world, in the athletic world, they talk about belief a lot, and belief is very important. But can I tell you something? You can believe a lot, but if your self-worth is low, you'll sabotage that belief. And valuing people, really helps them have a sense of self-worth and identity. So he said, value them every day, then believe in them every day. That's where the optimism comes in, and the possibilities come in, and then unconditionally love them. He said, John, there are very few people in this whole world that have ever been unconditionally loved. But he said, if I would do those three things every day, that I would be leading people, because people would be around me all the time because they don't experience that. So I do that. So when I teach or when I write a book, let me just, if I can have 2 minutes, let me do a teaching on this, because I promise you, I had never read anything about this. I was writing a book about a year and a half. I'm writing books all the time, but I was writing a book about a year and a half ago on the 16 laws of communication. And I was talking to the communicator about preparation. And whenever I teach or whenever I write a book, whenever I teach, I have my best lesson and I have my big lesson. And they're not the same. My best lesson is the lesson I'm teaching. Right now, you and I are on the podcast. We're talking about high road leadership. So that's my best lesson. We're doing high road leadership right now. So it's very specific. And I call it my best lesson because I'm giving it my best shot. Okay. Now that changes from audience to audience, day to day. The best lesson is always changing. But the big lesson never changes. The big lesson is what's behind the best lesson. It's the John Maxwell DNA. Who am I as a person? Who am I as a communicator? So, to find out what my big lesson is, I have to ask myself 4 questions. This is going to be worth every person's time on this podcast, I promise you. The 4 questions I have to ask myself, and everyone that does this to find out what their big lesson is. The first question is, what do I want them to see? The second question is, what do I want them to know? The third question is, what do I want them to feel? And the last question is, what do I want them to do? Know, or see, know, feel, and do. Those are the 4 questions. Now, for our audience today, let me pull this teaching out just for a moment. I'm going to give you my 4. It shouldn't be anyone else's 4. It's just unique to me, just like yours would be unique to you. But I'm going to give you my 4, and I'm going to give them to you so that you can now identify on how to work these questions out in your own life. So whenever I'm teaching, speaking, writing, whatever it is, what I want my audience to see is their possibilities. I am a possibility communicator. So what I'm always doing is I'm lifting the lid for people. I'm always expanding the room. I'm making the picture bigger. So no matter how they saw themselves when they come in to hear me, when they leave, they're going to see themselves with expansion. I'm going to lift the lid. I want them to see their possibilities. Cool. Does that make sense?
Totally. I love it.
Okay. Now, the second thing, what I want them to know is that I value them. I want them, every time I speak, to feel incredibly valued. I want them to look at me and say, not only is he a good communicator, I want them to look at me and say, he cares for me. He really cares for me. I did the opening session a few years ago for the United Nations, and I was speaking to every ambassador in the world, and they come from all kind of governments. Dictatorships, kingdoms, socialism, parliamentary rule, and I thought, how do I talk to these ambassadors who come out of different leadership cultures about leadership? And I spent 2 hours. I did the opening session in New York City, 2 hours on 3 questions that every follower asks of their leader. And the first question is, do you care for me? That's the first question. And second question is, can you help me, which is about competence. And the third question is, can I trust you? Yep. Can I trust you? Well, do you care for me? Well, I when I'm teaching, I want to open up the world. I want them to see possibilities because I do care for them. I want to expand them. Okay, that's what I want them to see. What do I want them to know is I want them to know that they're valued. The third thing I want them to feel is empowered. Whenever I teach, I put the cookies on the lower shelf. I want everybody to have some. Yeah. It's obvious I've had too many, but anyway. I want them to feel. I want them when they leave not to say, "Maxwell's amazing. Look what all he's done." I want them to say, "I can do that." Yeah. That's within my reach. I can do that. I want them to feel empowered. And then what do I want them to do? I want them to apply. I want them to, they have to go out and do it. There is, as you know, there is no success without action. There's just none
Totally.
at all.
Right.
And so I want them to, but because I speak to leaders, I want them to apply and multiply. So I tell leaders, you apply it to yourself first, but you multiply it as quickly as you can in others. That's if you don't. In fact, if you're not multiplying, you're not a leader.
Right.
And so, those are the four things that I want. Does that make sense?
So
and
good.
again, that so when you talk
Yes.
about valuing people, Molly, they know whether you value them. You can't fool people.
Right.
You know when they're in the game for their own interest.
Yep.
And again, that's why I'm so sad about some of the leaders that we see today, because I look at them and I say, they don't give a rip about me. They're all in it for themselves, and it's just it can be changed. It needs to be changed. That's all.
I heard a comment the other day from somebody that said another level of success, however you might define it in your own life, is preferred. Right? In other words, sort of laddering up our lives, living into a better version of ourselves, right? As it relates to a leader that helps us see, know, feel, do, and really believe it, right?
Yes.
That at some level, it then becomes a preference that they choose to opt into. And we know that at the end of the day, right, we pour this in, but they have to opt into the action, the behaviors, the beliefs, the mindset. John, when you think about see, know, feel, do, and when we think about this mission that you're on, that I'm on, to inspire people to opt in to their full potential, to lead, to inspire, to change and make the world a better place and those that they touch. What have you found to be the most effective way, and there's probably lots, to unlock that spark in people?
It's such a great question. In fact, I think every leader is constantly asking that question, because even when we come up with an answer, and I'm going to give you my answer in a moment, it's never sufficient for a great leader. It's kind of like, this is the best answer I have for now, but there's a better answer out there, and I'm going to find it. I was privileged in the sports world. I was privileged for 14 years to have John Wooden be a mentor of mine.
Wow.
And so we were talking one day, and he said to me, John, he said, there's a question as a coach and a leader I ask every day. Well, I'm all in. I mean, every day, coach, what is it? And he said, the question I ask every day is, how can I make my team better? He said, every day, how can I make my team better? Because he says, they're never operating at the very, very top level. There's always more room for change and improvement. And so I've got to find that, and I've got to help expose them to it and help them practice it so that it makes it better. And I think when you ask that question, Molly, I think every leader is asking themselves that question. And it starts, first of all, this sounds selfish, but I don't mean it to be selfish. It starts with me.
Yeah.
Before I make you better, I got to make me better. I have to, you cannot give what you do not have.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's not selfish. If you're on a plane, what do they tell you?
Right.
In case of emergency, here comes the oxygen. What do? You put it on yourself first? Well, that sounds a little selfish. I got my child here. Hey,
Right.
kid, wait for a moment.
Right.
Let me see if I can breathe first.
Sure.
Or you got somebody elderly. Well, what they're really saying is, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of the person beside you.
Right. Sure.
And so when people talk about potential, the first thing I have to ask myself is, am I continually learning, growing? Am I continually getting better? And I think for the great leaders, I don't think there is ever a finish line.
Totally.
I'm going to, in fact,
Agree.
I have 13 books yet to write that I want to write. I've got a writing queue there.
I bet.
And one of the books I want to write is going to be entitled, Is There a Finish Line? And the whole issue is going to be for most people there is. Most people say, I get a certain age, I think I'm going to retire, or I make a certain amount of money, or if I could just live, if I could just live there. And so they have a kind of, I don't know what you might call a destination disease, and and they somehow think that there's a place where it's over. Well, first of all, that's self-imposed. And so if I have some kind of a self-imposed finish line out there, Molly, when I cross it, I'm finished.
Right.
This is the big miss, I think. It's
John, agreed. This is.
I'm finished. It's kind of like I'm finished.
Right.
And I sit there. How many people do you know, Molly? And you know dozens, because I know dozens. They still got a lot good in them, but they quit.
Yeah.
They're just, so I don't think, my father lived to be 98. He worked full time through his 95th year. And we were having lunch one day, and when he was 92, and he looks at me and he said, "Son," he said, "I've been thinking about this." He said, I believe my greatest days are still ahead of me. And he's 92.
That's so cool.
I know people 22 who can't say that.
Right.
And so when people talk about how do I maximize potential, I tell them, first of all, you have to grow every day. The only guarantee that tomorrow is going to be better for you, Molly, for me, or for anybody on this podcast, the only guarantee that tomorrow is going to be better is that we're growing today.
Yep.
The moment that we stop growing, we stop going.
Yep.
And so therefore, I would say personal growth. And then once you have that personal growth, you have got to stay in your strength zone. You got to find out what you do really well. You can't skill sets. You can't go from a 2 to a 10.
Right.
You can go from a 6 to an 8. You can go a couple numbers, but in matters of choice, you can have incredible growth, but in matter of skill sets, you have very incremental growth. So what you got to do is you got to find out, what am I already a 6 in?
Right.
I'm already above average.
Right.
That I could maybe make into an 8.
Yep.
Or a 9. Now I'm cooking. You follow me? So I tell people, you've got to grow every day, but you got to grow in the area of your strength. If I grow in the area of my weakness, I tell people, for example, I like to play golf, but I'm not. I'm
You're not going out on tour anytime soon, John?
Yeah, I'm not going on tour. Okay. So listen, it's great for a hobby. It's terrible for a career.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm hearing you say I'm not going to make it in the NBA. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Well, I'm not, yeah. Okay.
I agree with you, though. I love it. It's true.
So grow in the area of your strengths, because that's where your return is. And if people are looking for return, you got to stay there. So I would say you have to grow every day, and you have to really know yourself and really practice and stay in your strength zone to maximize your return.
And I've heard you say, and I agree, talent, it isn't enough, right? I mean, talent, in other words, the skill of a 6, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, right, that's just a hair above average. So how do we unlock the discipline, the pursuit of better? And John, what your dad said and what you're sharing, I mean, one of the things that always used to break my heart is when I would watch people chase an achievement, a moment in time, right? At some level, I think the traditional definition of drive is anchored in this linear pursuit of an outcome. And sadly, I've seen, I'm sure you've seen over and over again, if you're chasing this one outcome, this promotion, this house, this car, this selling of a company, and once you do it, I mean, when you think about it, what do you do next? So this daily and consistent pursuit that is, in fact, never ending. There is no end. It's so fulfilling, too.
That's why we have to be growth-oriented more than goal-oriented. I think goal setting is wonderful. But let me tell you something. When you hit that goal, how many times you hear a person say, and now what am I going to do? I mean, look at the athletes. Okay, now I'm no longer able to play the game to the level I was, and so now what am I going to do? But if you're constantly growing, you can hit every goal. Yeah. In fact, I say don't go to where you want to go, grow to where you want to go.
That's so good. Yes.
And when I grow to where I want to go, I'm still growing. And when you're growing, you have options. You have options in life. And, I believe there's always an answer, And I believe that once I find it, there's always a better answer.
That's cool.
And then once I find the better answer, I always believe also there's more than one answer. And that never allows. See, if you believe that, you never can settle. You cannot settle if you think there's a better answer. So, I write books. I remember, I think I had gotten to the level of about 28, 29 million books sold. And I remember talking to my writing team, and I said, I have got to learn a different way to write. And they said, what do you mean? Look at all the books. I said, I know. But there's something within me. I'm not unlocking everything that's within me as a writer.
Wow.
And so I sat back, and I realized I'm a thinker, so I think and I think and I write. And I said, I need to have somebody pull me out emotionally. I need to have somebody ask me questions about and let me just talk it out. And I did. I found this terrific lady, and she would sit with the tape recorder, and we would sit for 3 hours nonstop, and she'd ask me questions, and I would just answer them.
Oh, wow.
And I found a more emotional way to write that connect with the audience. Now, what I'm saying is, at 28 million books, you can sit there and say, I got it. But,
Right.
but I don't got it.
Right.
Now at 37 million, I still don't got it.
Yeah.
I've never. I was in the Middle East with Mark Cole, who's the CEO, runs everything for me, and we were having dinner one night. And he said, John, I watch you celebrate, and then I watch you very quickly move on.
Yep. Yep.
And he said, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, and I have what I call the 24-hour rule. And that is whatever is great, celebrate for 24 hours, then could you get over it?
Right.
And it's also, hey, if you screwed up bad for 24 hours, okay, weep, kick the cat. I don't know what you're going to do, but get over it. You got 24 hours to get moving again. And I told him, I said, there's a difference in my life between best and better. And every day I try to give it 100%. I really do. I try to give it my best. But no matter how good my best is today, that's my ceiling today, but tomorrow it's my floor.
I love it. Yep.
Because here's what I know. There's still room for me to get better. I've never had a talk yet that I couldn't improve. I've never had a book yet that couldn't have been better. I've never had a thought. I've never had a thought that was fully developed. And so therefore, it's kind of like I live in the moment and give it 100% my best now, but tomorrow I know that what was best today it's got to be better tomorrow. And if it's not better tomorrow, then very quickly everybody's going to pass me, and I'm going to be out. I'm going to be out of the game because I got too satisfied.
John, it's so interesting. So, for almost 20 years, I was a sports agent, and I lived in a world where getting better every day was the only way, or you lost your job. I mean, there was guys right behind you watching your stats, waiting for you to jam it up for a long enough period of time that you got pulled and they got a shot. And so it was an environment that you got better every day because at some level it was the only way to stay at that level. And unlocking that and transferring that over to the business world. The truth is, John, when I came over to the more traditional business world, I was like, this is amazing. Like, people don't wake up and try to get better. And because it was the way that it was really kind of all I knew. So I'm curious, when I hear you talk, it's so cool. What role does curiosity play? Because it feels like it's just running a parallel path to so much of what you just shared around pursuing better every day.
Well, I love the question about curiosity. First of all, I'm 77. And what somebody asked me the other day, said, how do you keep young? I said, I don't hang with old people. Let me tell you something. There are several trends of getting elderly that are not healthy trends, and one of them is you lose your curiosity. And let me tell you what happens. I can tell a person is losing their curiosity when they stop asking questions. And I ask an abundance of questions every day. Molly, if you and I are having lunch, I start the lunch off. I'm going to start asking you questions, just like you're popping at me right now on your podcast. I'm going to ask you a question. In fact, I wrote a book, maybe 10 years ago, some time ago, called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And what, okay. The number one leadership mess up I think, is leading by assumption. And I watch people do it all the time. In other words, they assume they know where the people are. They assume that they know what motivates the people. They assume that they know what their people are thinking. And how can you get so assumptive over this? It's because you're not asking questions. And so what I tell leaders all the time is you got to find people before you can lead them. The first, it's you got to find them. You got to find. It's your illustration you gave on when we were doing my book launch on Tom Izzo.
Yeah.
And him going to his players and you tell me what's he doing as a coach? He's pulling out of them what they really want in their life, and then of course now he gets a game plan for them, and you got to find him. So what happens is this: when I assume I know where my people are, I'm not leading them well because I don't know what they need. And the only way I can find out what they need is by asking questions. I've got to be curious.
Yeah.
And by the way, relationships become old and stale when you stop asking questions. When you lose that curiosity, when all of a sudden you say, "Oh, I got that one down. I know exactly how she thinks. I know exactly what he's going to do," and we lose it. So what I believe is essential is the fact that I have a statement. I have a teaching, in fact, that says when you're at the head of the class, you're in the wrong class. Get out of that class as quick as you possibly can. Because when you're at the head of the class, you're going to tell everybody what to do, and you're going to be as worthless as can be. You gotta always be around people bigger than you, better than you, faster than you, smarter than you.
Yeah.
And so I purposely put myself there. And when you look at the business community, it's no small wonder why only a few people really are highly successful. It's because very few people, when you talk about in the sports world, somebody's behind you and they're looking for you. Hey, would you be injured? Would you just have a few bad games? I'm ready to take your spot. Well, we don't have that most of the time. I tell people all the time, you got to be on the inside chasing yourself. You got to be on the inside,
That's right,
not content with where you are. But I think curiosity is. In fact, I'm always sad when I'm around people that don't ask questions. I think, how do they learn? I mean, how do you learn if you don't ask questions? And I've learned to ask questions all the time, and every day. In fact, I have for 40 years, every month without fail, had what I call learning lunches. And that's why I can hardly wait to go out with you. And a learning lunch,
I'm
is very
looking
simple,
forward to that,
Molly.
sure.
I've got 7 questions to ask. And I can hardly wait to buy your lunch and I go and ask you the 7 questions because you talk about food. You're going to give me food from my mind. You're going to give me food from my soul that I'm going to buy. But if I don't ask questions, how am I going to get to where I want to go? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And at the most fundamental level, it's such an interesting way to approach life every day.
Totally.
It's just such an interesting way to approach life. You talk about emotional capacity.
Yes.
And sort of good tactics that can ladder up to us having emotional capacity, which to me is a little bit layered with resilience, which I think we all need. Can you just sort of talk about the importance of that?
Well, I talk about it in the book. I talk about the fact that a high road leader has emotional capacity.
Sure. Yes.
And I think that when leaders fall short, it is very seldom in the fact that they lack leadership knowledge. I think it's almost always that they lack leadership internal strength and character to go through the extremely difficult times. I think that we lose our way in adversity. I mean, all we have to do is go back a few years, look at COVID, and look at the effects it's had upon our culture, upon our country, and we still haven't seen the total effects of COVID yet. It's going to take 12, 15 years to flesh all that out. But for example, when people kind of lost their way and what am I going to do? And so what happens is we usually settle for less. During difficult times, Instead of saying I have to swim upstream, I've got to overcome, I've got to find the light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. Instead of that, we have a tendency to pull back. Adversity causes people to freeze. I had the largest stewardship company for nonprofits in America a few years ago. I sold it, but anyway, I loved it. I had it for maybe 20 years. I took it from nothing to we were raising like $3 billion a year for people. But anyway, every day we would sign 3 to 5 contracts. Now you have to go back now to you have to go clear back to 9/11. Okay. When 9/11 hit, from that date until the end of the year, we never signed another contract. Because all people would think about is, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. And when they don't know what's happening, they freeze. They just stop and say, I'm not going to do anything until I can figure it out. Well, you and I both know that's a disaster in itself. And so therefore, instead of developing emotional capacity through adversity, okay, let me put it this way. I used to think, wrongly, when I was young, I thought, I am going to be really successful, and I'm going to pay the price on the front end. I'm just going to pay the price, so that on the back end, I don't have to pay the price anymore. That oh my gosh, I've made my money, I got my home, I'm done. It's kind of like Eureka. Well, that's so stupid. That's just anybody that when you go through hard things, you don't get through hard things so that you can have easy things. You go through hard things so you can handle harder things.
Yeah.
And that's the huge miss. In other words, I do the hard today, not to have the easy tomorrow. I do the hard today so that tomorrow I can develop and do the harder tomorrow. And that's where these high road leaders develop their emotional capacity, because they're in it for here's the key. When I'm in it for something more than me, the price I am paying will maybe be greater than the price I pay just for myself. And so therefore, high road leaders understand that, and they're willing to stay in the game because the game is bigger than themselves. Success is about me. Significance is about others. And you and I both know, Molly, a lot of very unhappy, successful people, very wealthy. There's in fact, honestly,
So sad.
I think successful people are every bit as unhappy as people that are not successful at all. I mean, when I travel into some developing countries of the world, and they have very little, and yet they seem to have a tremendous amount of happiness in their life. And so this idea that I know a lot of unhappy people that are successful, but I've never met. See, significance is where I get off of myself. It's not about
love that
myself.
stuff. Yeah.
It's all about other people. It's about you. It's about your podcast today. It's about helping you, adding value to when we're done. You say, John helped me today. Okay. The moment I put myself wanting to help other people, get it off of me, that's where real fulfillment comes. When we go into transforming of nations, and we do that in different countries, I'll bring maybe like 300 of my coaches with me. And they give up a week. They pay their own airfare. You know, they're sleeping in places normally that are not going to be near as nice as what their own home. Anyway, and I tell them the first night, I said, I know what you did. You came to help other people. But Friday, when you get on the plane to go home, you're going to find that other people helped you more than you helped me. And what happens with significance is the more you give, the more you receive. And so I have never met, Molly, an unhappy person that gave their life to other people. Now, I'm sure there's one out there. But when you're living a significance world, there's a fulfillment that you have. The success, money, all that other stuff. It just never can give it to you. It really can't. And so I think when we begin to think that way, we begin to develop our emotional capacity so that, because think about it, one more thought. Gosh, there's so much I want to say.
So good.
Listen,
Love it.
the only time leaders are needed is during difficult times. I look at leaders all the time. I say, you cannot moan and lead at the same time. So would you figure it out? I mean,
Right.
who wants to go to a moaning leader? Oh,
Right.
I hardly wait to go to work today. Boss is going to be there and going to be complaining about everything. Oh,
Right.
this is very fulfilling. No, no, no. You can't moan and lead at the same time. So get over this. And this is so important, and it's such a big miss. If everything was easy and everybody had the answer, they wouldn't need you or me. They don't need any leaders. They got it.
Yeah.
The only reason people need leaders is because life is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So every time life is difficult, it's kind of like, for me, my best moment, because this is where I shine. This is where I turn the light on. This is where I look at people and say, it's okay. I mean, during COVID, I was asked, as anybody was that's leading, hundreds and hundreds of times, how long is this going to last? And I said, I have no idea. I really
Right.
don't. I've never been through COVID before. This is kind of new for me, too. But I said, let me tell you what, I don't know how long it's going to last, but I can tell you and assure you with great confidence, I'll be with you through it all. I'm not going anywhere.
Right. Right.
I'm going to hang with you. We can do this together. We're going to make it. Well, that's the ability to handle that emotional baggage and stuff that people so many times they quit not because they lack giftedness and ability or opportunity. They quit because they just run out of gas. And that's very sad. It doesn't need to be. So we have to learn how to fulfill our tank and do all those other things, obviously.
John, it feels like, too, resilience, recovery, getting back in, if you will, showing up when it's hard, leading when it's hard. I'm hearing you say that it's anchored in something bigger than ourselves, a purpose, a core value that we're thriving and driving, not just ourselves toward, but others. What do you tell people when they say, well, I really, because I'm sure you've heard this, I've heard this, I really don't know, like, what my purpose, if you will, is. Because
Yeah.
I think our purpose can suffocate the fear. It can overcome
100%.
the speed bumps. How do you coach people on that, John?
Two things. The first thing I share with them is not 100% effective. It's probably 70, 75% effective. The other one is 100%. But the first thing I ask them to do is I say, just tell to me about what you're passionate about in your life. What is really meaningful to you? What is it that just stirs up that passion? Because passion is the great energizer. You know, I don't run out of energy. I should, but I don't, because I still love what I do and I'm passionate about what I do. Now, passion is about 70% accurate. So I've heard people say, do what you love and you'll always be fulfilled. I'm not sure that's true. I'm not even sure that that's true. I mean, I love golf. So if passion was all that it needed, I would be on the tour today. I would, because I really love golf. The problem is I'm not any good at it, but I do love it. It's never lessened my passion. I'm still passionate about the game. I'm just
Right.
not good at it.
Right.
So that's what needs to be your hobby. We'll go back to that. Let that be your hobby, but don't let that be your career. So, but about 70% of the time, I think passion will get you there, but it's not always. But the other thing is, you just have to ask yourself, what am I good at? What am I? What is the most natural thing that when I do it, it just works? And I tell people all the time, ask other people what. But you've got to discover your strengths, because I think our giftedness and our talent coincides with what our purpose is. And so I think when a person finds out what they're really good at, now I think they narrow the field about why am I here and what am I supposed to do, and they can begin to now get very select in the areas, because there may be a dozen areas that you're really good at, and then you have to kind of practice, experiment until you find it. But those are the two. I say, what are you passionate about, and what are you good at? And if you can answer those two, now you're really in gravy when what you're good at is what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Now that's when you're unstoppable. That's when you're 77 and not even desiring in any way to ever quit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love
You're
I tell
77 and you're
people
just
all the
getting
time when they ask
started.
me, I really, and somebody said the other day, how do you keep the pace? I said, oh, that's very simple. High energy and low IQ. That's so perfect.
And humility. Tell me this,
Yeah, I
John.
love
When has your leadership been most tested? Or when have you felt like you failed as a leader, and what did you do to learn from it, and maybe what was that situation and in service of others?
It's a great question. Well, first of all, there are many times I feel like I failed as a leader. Because in life you don't get to win everything. I mean,
Right.
so I mean, it's not like 20 years ago I felt one time maybe I failed. In fact, I consider failure a part of a leader's life, and the failure that bothers me the most is when I feel that I didn't do my job as a leader. That I could have done something better for the people that would have allowed them to maybe triumph. Or it's much more about what I didn't do to prepare myself than the people. I say if I were responsible to kick the person that's the biggest detriment to my leadership, I wouldn't be able to sit down for a week because my biggest challenge is leading me. It's always leading me. And I think high road leaders understand that the greatest challenge they have is leading themselves, because if I lead myself well, I will lead my people well. We don't have a people problem; we have a leadership problem in that process. But in the area of failure, boy, sometimes let's do a whole.
Yeah.
I would, because I do a talk that the corporate world really loves. I've written a book, I just haven't put it out yet. The manuscript's done. But I have a talk called How to Receive a Return on Failure.
Oh, that's cool.
And I have 6 different teachings on how do you receive a return on failure. But let me just give one real quickly, just a quick little drop. I think the big mistake we make is we separate failure and success. I think that's a huge mistake. And we basically say, really succeed, don't mess up. You do it right, don't, okay. And I think we separate, and I think it is unhealthy, unrealistic to ever separate success and failure, because that's not the way my life has been. My life hasn't been, for 3 months, I've hit everything I tried, and it's just been amazing. And it's just been, or for the last 2 months, every time I've tried something, I lost. I've never had my losses go in clumps or my wins go in clumps. I win a little bit and I lose a little bit, and it's part of the process. And I think that we're supposed to keep them together, because I think when success and failure is put together, both matures the other and brings the best out of others. So let's say that I'm really doing well and I'm really succeeding. I'm getting a lot of wins, Molly. I got to keep failure right beside me, because can I tell you something? If I keep failure close to me and my successes, it'll keep me in an environment of humility. I'll stay humble, even though I'm winning. I'll know that failure is close enough that it's going to happen again. And I think I need, when I'm losing and I'm in the ditch and life isn't going well, I need to keep success real close to it, because I think that when I do that, it gives me resiliency. And I think humility during success and resiliency during failure is because you keep the other one with it. And you start separating them, and you lose perspective, Molly. You lose perspective, and all of a sudden I look at it, and now I've lost perspective of what success really is, or even what failure is. Does that make sense?
That is just a really cool way to think about it. And I think we live in a world where I feel like right now there's a little bit of a low failure tolerance. And when we don't push ourselves because we don't want to fail, I think that's a direct correlation to opting out of an opportunity for growth.
Oh, totally.
Because when
and there's no success without action. I mean,
right.
the moment I say I'm not going to do that, because what has happened is I've already lost. Now you're not even in the game. You can't win a game you're not in.
Yeah.
And so you've got to always have to have action. In fact, I wrote a book several years ago called Intentional Living, and the whole thesis of the book was that you have to. the only way you can turn good intentions into good actions. And by the way, good intentions, that may be the most overrated phrase in the whole world. Well, yes, I've not done it yet, but I'm going. Yes, I'm
Right.
going to do that. Yeah, that's as worthless as nobody has ever
That's so
had their
funny.
life. Is that true? Well,
It's
yeah.
so funny, John. My tennis coach, he'd go, get down, you step in, and I would go, I'm trying, and he would look at me and go, and one time I'll never forget, pulls me up to the net and said, let me tell you about the word try. It means
Yeah.
nothing. It's like
That's,
intention.
that's exactly right.
It's
That's
so
right. You
interesting.
got to turn it. You got to turn them into action. You got to,
Yeah.
and I think this is the big miss. Again, we freeze during difficulty and adversity. We hold back, and that causes us now to be a little bit more phlegmatic and a little bit more apathetic. And then what happens is we begin to live that lifestyle. And I think what happened with COVID is we let people basically not go to work for a year, and when you let people alone and put no challenges in front of them, most people will not improve their life. They'll go down in their life. And I think what
interesting.
happened is a lot of us, we just went down. And then we got comfortable with where we were. And now all of a sudden, when we got to get back in the game, and how many people, they're still not in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. I could do this all day long, but I can't because you're busy and you've got stuff. So I want to wrap with rapid fire, and then I'm going to get on the phone with your team and plan our lunch, which I'm looking forward to.
Come on.
We could have a 4-hour meeting and go tee it up. I'm down for either one.
Well, and I can put you on the great golf courses. In fact, I live at Jupiter Hills in Florida, which has a 3-year waiting list. It's
Wow.
a fun. Oh no.
Yeah.
I know the courses, and well, you do too.
I'm
You
down.
need-
No, I'm in. I'm in
Oh, no,
Orlando all the time for
okay,
let's do it.
And I live in the Highlands, North Carolina, in the summer, where they have fabulous golf courses. I mean, right in the mountains. So okay.
Yes.
So we got a date. We got a date now.
I'm in.
Rapid fire me so I can rapidly get out of here.
I know. So I'll hit you with a couple. What should leaders do more of?
Think.
What should leaders
They should
do?
think.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
What should leaders do less of?
Complain.
What have you read that I should read?
Oh my God. Well, I read everything Doris Kearns Goodwin writes. So she is the best leadership biographer in the world. She's written 7 books.
Wow.
So I read all her stuff.
What are you learning right now?
Oh, I'm learning how to be a 1%er, the top 1%. In fact, I'm learning while I'm teaching to be in the top 10% is to set yourself apart and be comfortable. But to get into the top 1% is to now distinguish yourself, that you're almost uncopyable at that level. So how do you get from the 10%? You're already in the top 90 to the 1%. What I'm learning is that each incremental percentage point compounds greater than the first 90%. So anyway, that's what I'm learning.
Oh, interesting. What's the greatest lesson you've ever learned?
People won't go along with you if they can't get along with you.
What's
You've got to be relational.
I say relational versus transactional, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's important. When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do?
Pull away. Just take a day off. Don't force it. Don't force it. Almost all the time, if you pull back from it, it'll come back to you. But be your best friend. Don't just beat yourself up when you hit this. Back off for a day and then come back in.
So the show's called Game Changer. So who and what is a game changer who inspires you and why?
Well, John Wooden was probably my greatest mentor as far as inspiring my life, because the man was a great coach, but he was even a greater person. That he was bigger on the inside than he was the outside.
That's fantastic. What a blessing that was. John Maxwell, you are such a gift. Thank you for living a life of significance and sharing all your gifts and knowledge with others. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to be with you.